December 16, 2000, early morning in Tallahassee, Florida. Mike Williams, a 31-year-old husband, father, and real estate appraiser, leaves his home just before sunrise. It's a routine hunting trip, one he's taken countless times before. But this time, Mike would never return. What started as a quiet morning at Lake Seminole quickly unraveled into a chilling mystery, a story of secrets, betrayals, and a murder-for-hire plot so twisted, it left even the most experienced investigators stunned. This isn't just a case of a man who vanished. It's the story of greed, infidelity, and a deadly conspiracy, one set into motion by the two people Mike trusted the most. How does a devoted father, a successful professional, and a man with everything to live for disappear into thin air? Why was his disappearance so quickly dismissed as a tragic accident? And how did it take 17 years to uncover the truth? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're drawn to the twists and turns of real-life true crime, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick with us, because this case is just getting started. Jerry Michael Williams, known to everyone as Mike, was born in October 1969, in the quiet community of Bradfordville, Florida, just north of Tallahassee. Mike grew up in a tight-knit, religious family, where faith, hard work, and loyalty meant everything. His parents, Cheryl and Mike Sr., raised him to believe in the importance of family, honesty, and doing the right thing, values Mike carried with him into adulthood. By all accounts, Mike wasn't the kind of man to take shortcuts in life. He was the first to show up, the last to leave, and the friend everyone counted on. Whether it was school, work, or his personal life, Mike gave everything his best. At North Florida Christian School, Mike stood out, not for causing trouble, but for being the kid who always followed the rules. That's also where he met Denise Merrill, the girl who would eventually become his high school sweetheart and later, his wife. The two married in 1994, building what many saw as the perfect life. They bought a home in Tallahassee, welcomed a beautiful baby girl, and Mike settled into a successful career as a real estate appraiser, a job that allowed him to provide comfortably for his family. Friends and co-workers described him as the guy who did everything right, the man who worked hard, loved his family, and lived a simple, honest life. But for all his responsibilities, Mike never let go of his love for the outdoors. Hunting and fishing weren't just hobbies, they were part of who he was, passed down from his father and treasured since childhood. Lake Seminole, straddling the border of Florida and Georgia, was one of Mike's favorite places, a vast 37,000-acre lake full of hidden coves, thick marshes, and quiet beauty. He knew every inch of it, every twist and turn, and spent countless weekends hunting there with friends like Brian Winchester, his closest companion since high school. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, nothing seemed out of place. Mike was busy with work, spending time with his baby girl, and getting ready for the holiday season. If there were cracks in the picture-perfect life he shared with Denise, nobody saw them. At least, not yet. December 16, 2000. Before the sun rose over Tallahassee, Mike Williams left his house, just like he had done so many times before. His destination was Lake Seminole, a sprawling body of water on the Florida-Georgia border, a place Mike knew well. It was supposed to be a quick solo duck hunting trip, the kind of outing Mike had taken dozens of times since he was a teenager. But this time, Mike never came home. That afternoon, when Mike didn't return, his wife Denise called friends and family, growing more anxious with every passing hour. By nightfall, search crews were at the lake, scouring the water and shoreline with boats, helicopters, and spotlights. Mike's truck was still parked at the launch site, his empty boat found floating near the shore. There was no sign of Mike himself, no tracks, no calls, no answers. For Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, the silence was deafening. From the very beginning, she knew something was wrong. Her son was cautious, experienced, and responsible, the kind of man who didn't take unnecessary risks, especially not when he had a young daughter at home. Authorities leaned toward the most obvious explanation, an accident. They theorized Mike may have fallen from his boat, drowned, and possibly been attacked by alligators common in the lake. Search teams pulled his waders and his hunting jacket from the water, floating eerily intact. But no body ever surfaced, and no clear signs of a struggle were found. Within just a few days, the official search was called off, with no answers for Mike's grieving family. Cheryl refused to accept it. Something about the story didn't add up. But for local authorities, the case was all but closed. A tragic accident that left more questions than answers, and a family left to wonder what really happened on that cold December morning. In the days following Mike Williams' disappearance, authorities leaned on a theory that seemed convenient, and for some, too convenient. They believed Mike fell from his boat, either after slipping or losing his balance, and drowned in the cold, murky waters of Lake Seminole. From there, investigators speculated that alligators may have attacked his body, leaving nothing behind. But experienced hunters familiar with the area pushed back. December was too cold for alligator feeding. The water temperatures dropped low enough to make them lethargic, not aggressive. If Mike had drowned, his body should have surfaced within days, caught in the vegetation or found along the lake's edge. But there was no body. No signs of a struggle. No bite marks. No blood. Nothing. Despite this, the case stalled almost immediately. With only an abandoned boat and some floating clothing, local authorities saw no clear evidence of foul play, and without a body, there was little pressure to dig deeper. One person who didn't push for answers was Denise Williams, Mike's wife. Just 6 months after Mike disappeared, Denise filed for and received a death certificate, citing accidental drowning as the official cause of death. It was unusually fast, especially for a case with no body and no conclusive evidence, and it raised eyebrows among some of Mike's family and friends. To the outside world, Mike and Denise were the picture of suburban stability, high school sweethearts, a beautiful baby girl, and a comfortable life in Tallahassee. But beneath the surface, those closest to Mike noticed cracks. Friends later said Mike had confided in them, worried that Denise had grown distant, pulling away emotionally, more detached than ever in the months before he disappeared. Two names would eventually come to define this case: Brian Winchester and Denise Williams. Brian wasn't just Mike's best friend. He was also Denise's confidant, a man who had known them both since high school. To most people, Brian was part of the family, a trusted friend who often hunted with Mike and even helped search for him after he vanished. But as the truth would later reveal, Brian Winchester and Denise Williams were hiding a secret worth killing for. For 17 years, Mike Williams' disappearance remained a cold case, a story whispered about, but with no answers and no body to bury. That all changed in 2017, when the truth finally surfaced, not through evidence found in the lake, but through a confession from the one person who had been by Mike's side that morning. In a shocking turn, Brian Winchester, Mike's lifelong best friend, was arrested for kidnapping Denise Williams at gunpoint during a dispute in their failing marriage. It was a desperate act by a man watching everything unravel, and it cracked open a secret he had managed to bury for nearly 2 decades. Facing serious prison time, Brian struck a deal with investigators. In exchange for immunity from a murder charge, he confessed to killing Mike Williams. There was no accident, and no alligators. Brian admitted he lured Mike out to Lake Seminole that morning, but the hunting trip was never real. Instead, Brian pushed Mike into the shallow water, where Mike struggled to free himself from his waders. That's when Brian raised his shotgun and pulled the trigger, killing his best friend execution style. The confession gave investigators the break they had waited years for, and it gave Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams, the truth she never stopped fighting for. Following Brian's confession, investigators recovered skeletal remains at Carr Lake, a remote spot just 5 miles from Lake Seminole. The discovery confirmed what Cheryl had always feared: Mike Williams had been murdered, his body hidden and his disappearance staged to look like a tragic accident. 17 years of lies, cover-ups, and unanswered questions came down to one chilling fact. Mike Williams had been betrayed and killed by the very people he trusted the most. With Brian Winchester's confession in hand, investigators finally had the answers they had been missing for nearly 2 decades. But even with Brian's admission that he pulled the trigger, he wasn't the only one responsible for Mike Williams' murder. In exchange for his full cooperation, Brian agreed to lead police to Mike's remains and testify about the chilling plot behind the murder. In return, he avoided a murder charge, leaving prosecutors to focus their attention on Denise Williams, Mike's widow and the woman Brian claimed was the mastermind all along. In 2018, Denise Williams stood trial in Leon County, accused of conspiring with Brian to murder her husband. Prosecutors painted a picture of a woman trapped in a marriage she no longer wanted, but unwilling to face the public embarrassment of divorce. With Mike's $1 million life insurance policy hanging in the balance, prosecutors argued that Denise and Brian began a secret affair, and together, they plotted to get rid of Mike for good. Brian Winchester took the stand, telling jurors that Denise was fully involved from the very beginning. He described how they carefully staged the hunting trip, knowing Mike would trust Brian without hesitation. And once they were out in the shallow water, Brian shot Mike at point-blank range, leaving his body to be buried nearby, all so Denise could collect the insurance money and the two could be together, free from suspicion. In January 2019, after days of testimony and hours of deliberation, Denise Williams was convicted on charges of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and insurance fraud. She was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 additional years for the conspiracy charge. But the legal twists didn't end there. In 2020, a Florida appeals court overturned Denise's first-degree murder conviction, ruling there wasn't enough evidence to prove Denise directly participated in the actual killing. Her sentence was reduced to 30 years, leaving the conspiracy conviction intact. Through it all, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, stood unwavering. For 17 years, she wrote letters, petitioned public officials, and refused to let her son's case be forgotten. Her relentless demand for answers is credited with reopening the investigation, uncovering the truth, and bringing those responsible to justice. In her final statement after the verdict, Cheryl said, "Mike didn't deserve this, and our family deserves the truth. We finally have it." For Cheryl, it was the end of a heartbreaking fight, and for Mike Williams, a quiet, trusting man who loved his family, it was the truth he could no longer speak for himself. The case of Mike Williams is a haunting reminder of how trust, greed, and betrayal can destroy lives, not at the hands of a stranger, but by the people closest to you. It took nearly 2 decades to peel back the layers of lies, a staged accident, a cover-up that stretched across years, and ultimately, a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a man's own wife and his lifelong best friend. Without Cheryl Williams' relentless pursuit of the truth, refusing to accept the alligator story and fighting to reopen the investigation, this case could have faded into obscurity, just another missing persons file gathering dust. But Cheryl never gave up. And because of that, the truth finally came to light. What do you think? Did Denise Williams' reduced sentence fit the crime? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're drawn to real cases that take years to unravel, make sure to subscribe for more. Like this video if you want us to cover more cold cases cracked open after years of silence. Thanks for watching Dark Truths, True Crime.